It's just a house to some people. You know, it's an eyesore to some people. But a lot came through here.
It had this 6-story tower with a balcony. You could see Manhattan from it.
As a kid, it looked like you could see the world.
It's a 360-degree view of the city. You just walk around it, and it's just fabulous.
There was a big playroom for the children with like a little stage, and that had been, you know, a big nursery for playing up there, which is a typical thing of the period.
It was one of the first houses with an elevator in it.
It was just the biggest, pushiest house in Newark.
On the corner of Court Street and MLK Boulevard in Newark Central Ward, there is a house on a hill. For over a century, it served as a symbol of arrival for a succession of remarkable residents. Today, it has been vacant for decades. Outside, the windows are boarded up, the property surrounded by chain link and razor wire. Inside, plaster dust covers the floor. Sunlight streams in through cracks in the brick, and rain floods the basement. But the story is written in its walls, thick layers of history that peel back to reveal the smooth stonework of a preservation project halted before its time. Tatters of wallpaper hung by Newark's first African-American millionaires. Mysterious symbols from the fraternal organization that used the building to host their meetings, and the initials of the immigrant-turned-beer baron who built the house as a monument to his success. Welcome to the Krueger-Scott Mansion. That the mansion stands at all today is due in large part to a major restoration project mounted by the city of Newark in the mid-1990s. Plans were drawn up to turn the mansion into an African-American cultural center.
My understanding was I was to be the executive director of a cultural center and try to raise monies for the actual restoration.
By the time the restoration project began, the house had been vacant for nearly a decade.
Someone called me and said, the house has been broken into, it's being raided, and we went through the house and saw it in this condition. We found a dog abandoned on the 3rd floor, up in the tower.
When we went in, we were just totally devastated by what we saw on the inside of the house. And anything that was of value, of course, had been ripped out.
Before the city finally got it bricked up, everything had been stripped.
The Krueger-Scott Cultural Center sponsored concerts, lectures, and festivals for the community. An African-American oral history project yielded hundreds of hours of audio-taped recollections of life in Newark from a vanishing generation of elders. The restoration part of the initiative, however, was not nearly as successful.
A new building gets built from the ground up. A restoration, whether it is a historic kind or a normal restoration of any kind of building, you have to start it from the top bottom.
The exterior envelope has been saved, that those boards are up to protect all the windows and what have you. New roof, all new chimneys. These things were critical.
The phase 1 was supposed to restore the roof, which we did, which was completed. And the phase 2 was to restore, as I will call it, a shell of the building. And that work was carried out to the 85% level. And then the money ran out.
Strict historical preservation guidelines, coupled with the deteriorated state of the building, resulted in cost overruns and interminable delays. After 7 years and $7 million, public and political support waned, and the project was halted. The last full-time resident of the mansion was self-made entrepreneur Louise Scott. Scott had relocated to Newark from her native South Carolina in 1938.
Her story was she came through and saw this house, and she said she was going to buy it.
Working days as a domestic while attending beauty school at night. She established a chain of beauty salons in the area and achieved renown as Newark's first African-American millionairess.
She was this great pillar of the black community in Newark and a success story.
She, like so many African-American women who got involved in beauty culture and what have you, really was a dynamic businesswoman who made a difference.
This is where she used to park her Cadillac, right here.
Scott maintained the mansion as both her residence and as the site of the Scott College of Beauty Culture, which provided training to generations of Newark stylists.
This was the reception area for the beauty school. The shampoo bowls used to be over here.
At one point, one woman had done 8 different people did their hair. And they would say, oh, how much work I did. And they were like exasperated. And Scott looked at us, look, when you can do 22 in a day, then you work.
This was my mom's sitting room. There used to be a brass dome.
Hardworking and civic-minded, she rechristened the mansion the Scott Cultural and Civic Center and used the house to host a variety of civic and church events.
This is my mom in 1963. This was taken every Christmas. She would invite all the kids from the neighborhood and she'd give them candy and fruit and toys.
She actually started her own daycare center there.
This was a dentist's office at one point. She had a doctor in here. Then it was used for a daycare center. My mama used to use this part for a church. This area here, she used to broadcast radio shows from. And then she turned this into a beauty shop for 2 students she had that had graduated.
Under her supervision, the house was spared near certain destruction during a late 1960s urban renewal program that sought to widen what was then known as High Street.
There were some urban renewal programs that showed that house being wiped off the face of the map.
Mrs. Scott had the mansion certified as an historic landmark with both the state and national registers of historic places. Louise Scott was an inspiring model of perseverance and achievement to the African American community in Newark, with her success symbolized in the 1958 purchase of the mansion from the Scottish Rite Masons. The house cost $85,000. She paid in cash. The Valley of Newark Scottish Rite Masons owned the mansion for nearly 3 decades.
I started going there in the middle 50s, around 1955. There is the building when it was occupied by the Scottish Rite. And again, you can see it's a gorgeous building.
They decorated the interior with Masonic symbols, added a 700-seat auditorium for their ritual performances, and hosted events for their members throughout the year.
We just had an office there. The secretary's office was there. There was a pool table in the pool room where several of the members liked to play pool and used to play pool. We'd sit around in the building and just use it more like a gathering place.
During this time, the organization was at its peak in membership, and the grandeur of the house only added to the Masons' prestige.
The main hall gives you an idea of how ornate the home was. To go in there and say, I'm a part of this. I'm really a part owner as a member of the Scottish Rite. It was a wonderful experience. When we were moving out, they were ready to toss out blueprints of the building and the old photograph of the building. This is prior to the Scottish Rite taking over the building.
Until then, the mansion had been a massive monument to the success of one man, immigrant-turned-beer baron Gottfried Krueger.
Gottfried Krueger was one of the big 5 beer brewers.
He was a beer baron, as they called him. There was a famous beer back then called Krueger's Beer.
Of course, Gottfried Krueger and the Krueger beer and all the things that he did.
Gottfried Krueger was born in Germany in 1837 and immigrated to Newark at the age of 15. He worked his way up from sweeping floors in his uncle's brewery to helming his own brewing company. His namesake brewery would later achieve renown as the first company in the U.S. to offer beer in cans. Krueger's interests extended into civic life as well, establishing numerous charitable organizations and holding a number of public offices.
He was a wonderful, very giving man. He had gotten a great deal from his citizenship, and he gave a great deal back.
As his fortunes and family grew, Krueger commissioned the construction of the massive mansion on what was then the most fashionable street in the city.
High Street was the core of the German upper class in Newark. The Kruegers were Germans and didn't give a damn about the old WASP hierarchy.
It became a great silk stocking district in the days of the Krueger Mansion. Many other great homes were built along High Street.
High Street was occupied by the people who were the civic leaders of the city. And they had their houses and they had their mansions on this street. Before it was renamed Martin Luther King Boulevard, the reason it was named High Street is because of the geographic location of the street. It was at the highest level in the city of Newark.
He wanted to put something high on a hill that was majestic to show the world that he had arrived.
Krueger's mansion boasted 3 stories, 40 rooms, and a brass-domed stained glass oculus that shone down to the grand staircase below.
This was apparently Krueger's library. Because when I was a kid, there were cabinets, wooden glass cabinets enclosed all around this room.
Rooms featured custom-carved cabinetry and opulent decorations.
When Mr. Krueger built his house, he told the architect to outdo the Ballantyne house, that his house should be better than the Ballantyne house. And it was, and it is.
Completed in 1889, the mansion cost $250,000 and was the most expensive residence ever built in Newark.
It was a grand, flamboyant beer baron's house.
There's a lot of richness that's still in this town, but we just can't let it go, you know, because then you could be anywhere. But when you have these kinds of buildings, you're somewhere.
For generations, the Krueger-Scott Mansion has been an unmistakable landmark of the Central Ward, a symbol of potential, perseverance, and success. For the German immigrant who seized upon the promise of the American dream. For the fraternal organization who reimagined the home and gave it a new purpose. For the self-made woman who defied the odds to build an empire. The legacy of the Krueger-Scott Mansion is etched in its proud tower and crumbling walls. Grand and fragile, the house on the hill awaits its next incarnation.